Just realized. Probably I'll start again. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. My name is Alex, and joining you from London, UK. I'll be today's host for this workshop. Here we go. So today's workshop is going to be all about building your full stack application. And it's everything that you need to know to get from nothing to full deployment ahead of the hackathon. So before we get started, there's a bunch of things that we need to cover. Like I just mentioned, we've got the hackathon starting in just a couple of weeks, and we require a team of at least 2 people, and the rewards will be up to $30,000 for all 3 different tracks. This information has been covered in all workshops, so if you're new, you should know that there's these 3 key areas that we're going to be focusing on. So first one will be building applications that will have a social impact. Next, we'll have economic and environmental impact, so building applications that incentivize daily habits that are positive for the environment. Let's say, for example, keeping our the beach clean, or just using less plastics, etc. And then, of course, a third track to keep expanding the VeChain ecosystem. And think here anything that is protocol tooling, DeFi, etc. Now, the hackathon is not the end of your journey building on VeChain. And whether you win at any of the tracks or you don't, it's not a problem, because we've got additional funding available at the back of that. So once again, whether you win or not, and you're building a consumer application, you can always request for additional funding of up to $30,000. And if you're building anything to do with ecosystem development and tools, there's about $50,000 available for each of those projects. Of course, you've got more information on the Academy's website. So if you head on over to academy.vechain.org, there's a lot of information there as to the criteria that we will follow when reviewing the projects and submissions, as well as you can also register early. We've got several teams that have already registered early on, so I encourage all of you to find team members and join us on the 22nd. Now, to the main part of today's live stream. We're going to be covering, again, everything to do with building your application. Now, this is a culmination of everything that we've been doing for the past few weeks. We started with a Solidity workshop. You'll find the playlist on YouTube. Next, we looked at the SDK and having a strong backend on your apps. We then moved on to the VeChain kits, and then we covered the VBeta integrations. So in this workshop is going to be a condensed and merged version of all those workshops that we've hosted for the past month and a half. So we'll start with a reminder of how to implement the VeChain kit on your front end. Then we'll move on to a really quick demonstration on how to use the SDK for your app, and how we've used some of these options from the SDK in the public application. And then finally, we'll have a really quick through first to how your smart contract should look like, how to implement the VBeta rewards system in your contract. And of course, we'll do a really quick submission of an application to VBeta. So let's jump in and get started. So best thing is to follow along. That's how I believe that you'll be able to get the most out of the workshop. And you've got all these commands in the description of this video. So the first application we're going to be covering, and where we've got the VeChain kit, where we've got our smart contract, and where we've got the reading and writing, and the SDK integration is all on the Learn to Earn repo. And while this is not something that we'll be covering in depth, you've got a full repo with loads of details on how the SDK can be used, and you can just use this second command that you've got on screen. But again, you can either watch again later on to get these commands, or we've left them in the description below. Like I mentioned, so we're going to cover briefly the SDK integration, the VeChain Kit integration, and this is for social and wallet login. We'll look at the SDK and then finally the Solidity backend. So, VeChain Kit. You've got a link in the description to vechainkit.vechain.org, I believe. So it should be second or third link. Here you've got the full documentation and you can dive deeper into this. And like I mentioned, our colleague Reese covered the VeChain Kit in depth a couple of weeks ago. What this is going to allow you is to simplify user onboarding, and we'll just make sure that this is ready in our application. So if you're following along, I suggest that you just do npm install in your local. But of course, for the hackathon, you're going to have to be using a brand new application. So this command that you've got here, you can copy it directly from the VeChain Kit documentation, or if you're up for it, you can also type it up while watching the video. But again, if you did follow along with the project repo that we've made available, let me bring that back. Just add the first command in your IDE and you'll be able to follow with these instructions. So npm install, and then that will be the first step for now. Now, for the VeChain Kit, one of the main elements that we need to cover is the reown app ID. Okay, this is what's going to allow us to include social login. So we'll go through this super quick. It will take just a moment. You can go to cloud.reown.com and create your free reown account. Again, I suggest, of course, especially ahead of a hackathon, there's a lot that has been going on lately with exploits. Use the official links. We've got the official links in the description, and that's going to be the best thing to do. So create your free reown account, and here you'll be redirected to your project's dashboard. Now in the dashboard, all we're going to be doing is creating a testnet app. So I'll just go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to call it test2, why not? And as you can see, very quick, it's going to create that project for us. Do go through all of the options available on Reown, because there's a lot of super interesting solutions. For example, we've got analytics as well. You can just check the activity on the app. And also you can define the social logins that you want to make available on your model. But for what we need right now is this project ID. Okay, this is what the documentation is going to require from us to be included in our app. Now, we've got the app ID already. So what we can do now is to go ahead and look at how this looks like in our application. So this is the Learn to Earn app. Once again, if you've cloned the repo, you will find this module right here. So under source, then head on over to app.jsx. Here, the VeChain Kit provider, so this code snippet is available on the documentation as well, and you can copy it directly from there. Or you can also use this as a template for your application. It's been customized, of course, for what we need. And just make sure that once you go live on mainnet, you're updating all of these URLs to mainnet as such, okay? But other than that, we'll keep it to testnet for the purpose of this demonstration. And here is where our project ID from Reown needs to go. So again, for best practices, we're going to add this onto a env file. Okay, we left you an example there. And on line 13, somewhere around here, yeah, there we go. That's where we will change this text for our app ID. Okay, once you've done that, that's most of the things that you would need to do for this example. There's a bunch of things here that are important. Make sure that you're updating your metadata, and make sure as well that you're indicating what wallet you want to allow. For today, we're going to be using vWorld only, but if you want to just make things a bit more open for other users, you can add more wallets. And here we've got login methods, which is just purely the wallet connection. here we can also add social login if needed. Now that this is covered, we also need to take a really quick look at that wallet connection. This is more for best practices, and it's just to make sure that we're making the application as user-friendly as possible. If you go to academy.vechain.org, you'll see there the criteria that we're going to be using when judging the submissions, and one of them is user-friendliness. So over here, you can do things such as making sure that you're saving. At the moment, it's on local storage. When you go live, it will be ideal that you've got a cloud database. But just to confirm that a user has correctly connected their wallet, we can also fetch the balance of that wallet. You will notice that in this example, we're getting the balance in VET tokens. However, for VBeta applications, the rewards will be distributed in Better tokens. So you may also add that so then the user can track how many rewards they're getting in Better. Then other guardrails, safety guardrails, to be honest, are things like formatting the address. If it's mobile friendly, it's better just to reduce the string of that wallet address. And things like, just that the connection has been done correctly and so on. It's not just about looking at code. I think it's going to be quite useful as well to see how this looks like in practice. So just for the time being, before we go into a lot of details, let's take a quick look at how it looks like in our application. So as simple as that, once we've added the script to our app, okay, in our case, if we head on over back to our app, it was on app.js. Something I didn't mention, by the way, is that we also need to wrap this in the main script of our application. Okay, so once we've included that script and we've handled anything from how to connect the wallet, etc., it's when we can it's when we can start looking at how it's applied on the front end. There we go. So wallet connect, super simple, and we're handling that model. There we go. We had vworld, wallet connect, and sync to, and then up to this point, and this is where I will stop with the demonstration, is that your wallet will open up and it will ask you to sign the transaction. I'm going to wait here because I'd like to show you a few other things before we see how this looks like in the front end. But this is pretty much what we've done up to this moment. Okay, we've installed the VeChain kit dependencies. We've applied the VeChain kit code onto our application. We've wrapped the script, and now we've got it on our front end. Okay, very simple application, and if hopefully this doesn't break it, we should see that is fairly mobile friendly. Let's get back to the correct. There we go. Great. So one other thing that we need to do after this is to explore the SDK. Why is the SDK important? So it's going to be the best way for us to connect to the network. Okay, and this is going to be to read information from the blockchain, to subscribe to events, and also to write data. Okay, we've got a bunch of things that we can do over here. For example, let's say that we want to get a consistent feed of data from all the events that have been emitted by our smart contract. We can subscribe to that using WebSockets, and we'll do this over here. So this is a very simple script. It looks slightly different from the repo that we left in the description, but the functionality is exactly the same. So as you can see over here, we've got the subscriptions import from the SDK, and we're going to be using WebSockets for that connection. So first things first is making sure that we're connecting to mainnet. Okay, and we're using the transaction subscription URL method just for now. Why am I doing this is because I want to focus on all the transactions that are emitted by my smart contract. So first thing is to add the mainnet URL as the first parameter. Next, here we've left it empty because leaving it empty just defaults to null. But here we can also index all the transactions that have been sent from a particular address, or all the transactions that have been sent to a particular address, or both, okay? But a lot of these events, they look quite similar on the blockchain. So what we're gonna be doing here is just to filter by the emitter address. So what you can do is when you're defining your connection to the network, what we can do is just to add our contract address. So then we're fetching all the transactions from that contract address. Oops. So we'll see how this looks like in practice. So it might take a few moments. Well, that was quite fast. Here we go. So we're getting live all of the transactions that are being emitted by that particular address. However, as you can see, there's not a lot of information that we get from just a single string, okay? So in this case, we can use the next option, which is to read information about these transactions. So what we will do in this case, again, using the SDK, there's two simple steps that we need to follow for this. The first thing is to initiate the Thor client. Again, we're going to be doing this on mainnet. We need to do a mainnet because we fetched all the mainnet transactions, and then we'll use the get transaction method over here. So let me paste the new transaction over here. We'll save it. And let's take a look at how that transaction looks like. Actually, before I print the results, this method is going to give us the raw information from this transaction, which is good if you need it. We'll look at another method in just a moment, but just for you to know that this is the kind of information that we'll print for these transactions. As you can see, reading the transaction gives us way more information, such as the clauses. Our colleague Reese covered what clauses are just a few weeks ago, but just for you to know, it's quite unique to VeChain, and it's a way to multitask on the blockchain. So we can include multiple transactions in a single payload. And one very important thing over here is to make sure that it hasn't been reverted, okay? We will see that on the next method. So as you can see, plenty of information that we get from passing all of these transactions over to the another script to read transactions. Now let's take a look at the other option. This other option is what we are actively using in the application that we've shared with you guys. So get transaction receipt. This is going to give us all the details that we need, at least the basic information that we need, that the transaction has been actually been fulfilled. I'll explain in a moment what the difference is in a moment. Excellent. One of the most interesting parameters that we get here is this. It means that it's been reverted. So when we're fetching all the transactions from the subscriptions, not all those transactions have been completed or confirmed on the blockchain. Okay, they need to be fully confirmed, and this is where we can get that information from the blockchain. So we do use this method on the app, so get transaction receipt, and it just can allow you as an app developer and admin to make sure that the transactions are going through, and also to inform your users as to whether the rewards have been fulfilled, and you know, just keep track overall that your application is being healthy. One final step, and I'll show you this over here again. We've got the writing option. Now, writing data requires gas fees. Okay, reading data and listening to data are completely free. You can consume as much data as you're capable of. However, to write data and propagate information to the blockchain, we do need to cover gas fees. I left you a link in the description, so if you need testnet tokens and you've missed some of the previous workshops, this testnet tokens available on the faucet. So just visit the faucet. Again, link is in the description, and you'll be able to claim some of those tokens. Okay. As you can see, point number 3, it will help us calculate how much gas the transaction is going to cost, and then we'll be able to cover it. So let's take a really quick look at some code, and then we'll go back to our application so that we can see how that looks like in practice. Now, why am I showing you this first? This is just a generic and quite broad way of creating your transaction script. There's a bunch of imports that you can bring from the SDK, but the main thing is going to be to initiate the Thor client, and then we need to prepare the wallet. To do this, in the case for this example, we've got a mnemonic in our env file, and then we prepare the wallet to get the private key of that from that mnemonic. So, cut long story short, first step to prepare your transaction is to get your wallet. Next, we will define the clauses, okay? And the first parameter is the target smart contract. You will see that in the app as well. And then also we need to define the ABI function. Next, we move on to calculating those gas results. Okay, so we estimate the gas using the estimate gas function. And here we pass the clauses. This is important in case, you know, we're going to be submitting multiple transactions as part of this. Next, we build the transaction body, and we move on to signing the transaction. Signing the transaction, quite important, can get a bit confusing, but there's 4 simple steps that we need to cover. First is going to be to activate our wallet. Okay, so we'll use the provider internal base wallet method. Then we'll use this wallet as second parameter for our provider, okay, using the VeChain provider method. There's a third optional parameter. I could have kept this empty because it defaults as false, but you can also define or enable fee delegation here. Again, just a few weeks ago, we explained everything that you need to know about fee delegation in one of our workshops, and we'll share plenty more information as well if needed. But once you've defined that provider, then we'll use that to get the signer. Okay. With this, we need to get the transaction ready. Okay. So we're using the signer over here, and we'll use the sign transaction method. We need to decode our transaction, and then we'll send it to the network. As a final step, optional as well, could be just to get the transaction, because here is where we get our transaction ID. Okay, so here it is. I think that you'll get to experience a bit more once you go through all of this code. But once again, just to repeat, writing transactions require gas fees. So make sure you go to the faucet. The faucet will only give you testnet tokens. Okay, this is why I've kept this as a testnet URL. Once you initiate the Thor client, you prepare the wallet, define the clauses, and we'll move on to calculating the gas results so we can build the transaction body and move on to signing and sending the transaction. Now, this is how it looks in theory, and you can give it a go running this this script. Again, it's available on the second repo that we've left in the description of this live stream. But how does all of this look like in practice? So we'll head back to our application, and we're over here. Excellent. So let's say first we're going to take a look at writing transactions. Okay. Why is this important? In VBeta, we need to submit proofs. Submitting proofs essentially means that when your user is completing a sustainable action, they need to submit a proof that they're doing something that is according to the guidelines of your app. Let's say, for example, you're building an app that is all about again, keeping a beach clean. And so you require on the front end, you require your users to include the location of the beach, include a picture of the state of that beach before they started cleaning, and then a follow-up picture after they've cleaned up. So in order to push that information to the blockchain, we need to write a transaction. So looking at this, you will notice that we follow something that's quite similar. Okay, we've defined several variables at the start, but all we need to know is that we are defining our wallet. Okay, and I'll move on quickly to showing you that here is where we're defining our wallet again. Okay, so this is where we fetch in the private key of our wallet. Like you saw earlier, we also initiate the Thor client. Okay, in our case, we've got network URL that's been defined there as testnet. Remember that you can just simply go ahead and put mainnet over there. Okay, if this looks slightly confusing, you would know that this is how we defined it earlier. Let me do it here. Okay, this is exactly how we defined it earlier on the previous code. Okay, as you can see over there. But we'll get back here. Let me just not break the code at the moment. We'll stay on testnet, and then we move on to several things. First thing is to define the clauses. Okay, here is where we add the smart contract, like we saw earlier. We also need to define the API. Okay, we need to build a transaction body, and then we get the signed transaction, and then we send the transaction to the blockchain. Oh, sorry. And finally, here is we're waiting for the transaction where we get the transaction ID. Easy. So as you can see, we followed very similar structure. We do have a few, just safety elements just to make sure that the transaction hasn't failed and so on. But what if we want to read the information of this transaction? What if we want to know if the transaction has been reverted or not? What if we want to keep a track record in our database as to how many transactions we're sending out? You know, how many proofs are being submitted, and what is the content of that proof, etc. Here we go. We've got the get transaction receipt method. Okay, in this case, we've defined a brand new function, and we're giving it the transaction ID once the transaction has been completed. Okay, as you can see, get transaction receipt is the same method that we used a moment ago on reading transactions. Let's go to here, reading transactions, transaction receipt. Okay, if we run this script is where you will see whether the transaction has been reverted or not, and then we can also save things. We can also fetch the information of that function, of that transaction, sorry. Now, this is how writing transactions looks like in our app, and also reading transactions looks in our app. The SDK, once again, has loads of different tools that will allow you to work out a better integration for whatever concept you're building. Once again, there's a live stream in the same playlist where you've got this, where you're watching this. You've got a live stream that was hosted by Reese, and he covered everything in detail as to how you could use the different tools within the SDK. Now, we've covered a lot in the from the SDK. So I want to take a moment just to do a really quick recap. Okay. First, at the start of this stream, we covered the VeChain kit. Okay, we looked at the integration on the UI. There is a sample script available on the documentation. Once again, documentation down in the description. And also the steps that you need to follow to make sure that it works in your front end, such as adding the script, of course. We need to wrap it in our main script on the app. And we need to include a Reown app ID on our environment file. Okay, Rion. You've got the Rion link, the official link in the description as well. Next, we've briefly covered the SDK, okay? And we've looked at some theory examples for listening to data on the blockchain, reading data as well, and writing and propagating information to the blockchain, okay? And you've got both. You've got one so you can start playing around with it. You can start seeing how you can adapt the code for your app, and also, you know, just to expand your knowledge as to how to query data and send data to the blockchain. Okay, you've got that repo in the description. And of course, we've looked at how we can include the SDK in an app example. Okay, in the app that you've got in the description, what we've used is writing transactions and reading the information from that transaction. Now, next thing is, no, before looking at any code, we're going to look at the smart contract section of today's workshop. And there's a bunch of things. The Solidity live stream that we hosted, it was probably the first live stream, and you will see it in the playlist for the workshops. We covered everything in detail for contract anatomy, how to define functions, how to map data, how to also trigger events, and so on. So for today, we're going to be doing a few things slightly different. We're obviously going to be walking through the code a bit faster. So you've got loads of information in the previous workshop. You've got a Solidity tutorial on academy.vechain.org. And of course, you can always reach out to us on the Builders channel. So Builders channel also should be in the description below. Now, just like it was covered during the workshop for Solidity, so we define our learn to earn contract. Okay, you may name it however you needed to name it, but there's a few things that are important. First, we need to build up an interface for the X to earn rewards pool contract. Okay, and then we're defining it down here. Why is this important? So again, on VeChain, and the purpose of VBeta is the rewards for daily actions that are completed through an application, right? So for example, if we keep using the example of cleaning the beach, we want to make sure that people are not doing this just as a one-off. So VBeta will help you distribute rewards to users that are completing those regular actions on your app. So there are several parameters that are mandatory on the distribute rewards function. Okay, first one is the app ID. We're going to get this in just a moment. We need to define the amount that we're going to be distributing for each successful approval, and of course the receiver's address. You will know the receiver's address. We will get it from our VeChain kit. And finally, the proof submission. Okay, we'll see how this looks like later on in the workshop. So again, like we said, we need to define the reward amount. In this case, we just set it as a constant of 10 better tokens. Like I mentioned earlier, your users will be rewarded in beta. So, you know, remember that you can also display the balance of their beta earnings on the UI, for example. Now, going to the app ID, this was covered last week by our colleague Kim, but I think it will be useful just to do a really quick recap of how things look like over here. So this is our application, right? So we want to make sure that we are also submitting this application so it's first of all eligible for VBeta distributions, and that we're setting it up to make sure that we can distribute rewards to our users. So this is super quick. For TESTNET submission, you will see that the process is almost immediate. Whenever you're submitting your application on TESTNET, that goes through a review process. Okay, so don't be surprised if it takes a bit of time for your app to be fully approved. And there's several processes such as endorsements, etc., that you need to fulfill. If you need more information on the whole mainnet submission, we've got, first of all, information on the Academy. Again, academy.vechain.org. And also there's plenty of information on the official VBeta DAO website. And of course, again, reach out to us on Telegram. The DevRel team is there ready to answer any questions. And if you need help, we'll always very happy to help. Now, again, we're submitting an app on TESTNET. If you need this URL, I've left it in the description of this video. And I'm going to call this test learn, right? We'll use this. I'll keep this empty just to make sure that we're moving ahead. I'm going to add a project URL. Your admin address could be the same wallet address that you've used to sign up. Okay. And then make sure that you're adding a logo and a banner. For the purpose of today, I'm going to be using the same image for both. But, make sure that you're doing this a bit nicer than what I'm doing at the moment. Meet these dimensions, and then your app's UI on the dashboard will look so much better. Once you submit the information, you will see that your wallet pops up. Okay. It will require some gas fees, but once again, you can get information, some of these tokens from the faucet. And that should be getting ready. Oh, there we go. Our app has been added, and well, that's giving me an error. Could be because I already submitted an app a moment ago, so ignore that error. That should work absolutely fine. Now, here we go. We've got our apps. Yep, that's probably why we've got a bit of an error over there. But once you've submitted your application, you can just go visit your app and you'll be able to get your app ID. Okay. A bunch of things that are important within your app ID would be, first, you can emulate a reward distribution if needed. Okay. Just by doing it over here. In your app settings, I cannot access the app settings right now. It's giving me a slight error, as you guys can see. But just by opening up your app, you should be able then to set up the rewards distribution contract or the rewards distribution wallet address. Okay. Now, once you've submitted your app on VBeta, you'll be able to get your app ID. Okay, which is what we see here on line 26. This highlighted app ID is what we need to add to our application. Now, this in your EMV example, it should be right here. Line 25, just remove this long string and paste your VBeta app ID. Super important that this is done, because then otherwise there's no consistency in our code. Back here. Okay, now we've got our app ID has been covered. Again, if you need more details, if you want a closer walkthrough on how to get this, the information that you need to add, or even the information about the endorsement process, Kim was hosting a workshop last week and you've got more details there. Several things that were already covered, but just for you to be informed, we define a student struct. Okay, here we include all the information required for the student, and there's a bunch of, again, guardrails to make sure that we're not registering the same user twice, or that we're graduating the same student twice, or that we're giving us the same student multiple certificates within a particular season. Why is this important? One of the key things that we need to make sure that we're avoiding is incentivizing false users or simply farmers, people that just want to extract value from the ecosystem. Okay. So we need to try and make things as complicated as possible for people to farm rewards from our applications, right? So in this case, we can just add those things to make sure we're not distributing rewards twice to the same person and so on. Like we spoke earlier, we can also map some data just to make sure, for example, that we know a particular wallet and their the student information. And we also can emit particular events. For example, if a certificate has been issued or if a submission has been graded. In the case of any other applications, if we keep using the example of cleaning the beach, you may want to make sure that, that the submission of the proof has been received and that a moderator has reviewed the content of that proof to make sure that people are just not taking pictures of the floor, for example, right? This is where farming can get a bit cheeky, and all you want is to make sure that people are cleaning the beach, and instead they're just showing a picture of their bedroom. I don't know. Okay, so yeah, just certain guardrails over there to make sure that people are not taking advantage of these benefits. There's a bunch of things as well that are quite important. All of this was covered during the Solidity workshop. But I'll just cover briefly the fact that, we've got our proof of submission, okay? We've got, we've got two very important functions over here, okay? First things first, so grading submission. Again, the way that we've built this app doesn't mean that is how you need to build your application, but could be useful before you can build a proper infrastructure to fully automate the proof submission, okay, and review of those proofs, is a mid-step between the submission of proofs and the actual distribution of rewards. Here, there is a registrar that will be our moderator, okay, and the moderator will be receiving a full list of submissions, and here we'll be able to review the fact that, whether the pictures are correct. In this application, we'll review if the links that people are submitting are correct or not, right? If they're duplicates or, just making sure that the data is real. And then we've got this distribute reward, okay? Distribute reward is the function that's going to be calling our X to earn rewards pool contract, okay? So we've imported it earlier. We defined the app ID. We've defined the rewards amount, and this function, essentially what it says is, let's make sure that the app itself doesn't have 0 tokens to distribute, and let's make sure that we've got the proof, okay? And then finally that we are activating and calling the VBeta rewards contract with our 4 mandatory parameters. Okay, so proof cannot be empty. Okay, if the proof was empty, then we wouldn't be able to distribute the rewards. Okay. Finally, there is a guardrail. Feel free to go through all of this information. One of them is updating the app ID. It could be that you made a mistake, or your app got exploited, or it could be a million things, right? So we also want to make sure that we're able to update the app ID. So only the contract owner can do that, and withdrawing any balance, okay? So making sure that that is safeguarded, and only the owner of the contract can withdraw any balances, okay? Now, we've got all of this covered. Let me make sure we've got this. Oh yes, it's a very important thing. So we've already worked on the Solidity smart contract. You've built it up, you've got all your data, you've mapped the information, you can emit particular events, and you've got very strong, useful functions defined, okay? And you've also included the VBeta rewards contract in your contract. Our next step is going to be to deploy and compile and deploy the contract, okay? This is one of the steps that we left in over here. Oh, too fast. Okay. So one of the steps that we're missing is that compiling and then distributing the contract to the network. So let's take a really quick look at how that looks like. There's several different options available. There's a lot of tools that will allow you to compile and deploy a contract. I believe on the first workshop, we briefly covered SolC compiler. We'll leave some information in the description. I know that that link is not there, but if you look for SolC compiler, then you'll find the full documentation there. And there's a bunch of other tools. For us, we're going to be using Hard Hat. Okay, so in your application, if you're following along, just go into scripts and then deploy. Here we've got an installation for Hard Hat. Hard Hat documentation also in the description. And here we've got things such as, making sure we're defining the contract name and, just a bunch of console logs. So this is our own customization of this script. But as soon as you install Hard Hat on your app, you will have this same, a similar script available on your installation. Okay, so there's not a lot to worry about here. As you can see, a lot of it is just console logs. Okay, so the script itself is off the shelf. It's available on Hard Hat, and all you need to do is just making sure that you're defining it according to what you need. But something that's really, really important from Hard Hat is making sure that we are updating the Hard Hat config file. Why is this important? So VeChain requires a very unique set of settings to make sure that you're deploying to VeChain, and it requires a bit of care when it comes to this. Okay, so once you've installed Hard Hat, you will have a Hard Hat config, but it's for Ethereum in this case. So for us, there's a bunch of things that we need to make sure that we're updating, such as the Solidity version. So it goes hand in hand with the Solidity version we defined in our contract. Okay, let's look at the contract. Okay, there we go. So it's 0.8.20. So that needs to be consistent first of all, and of course we need to define the EVM version. For now, we'll keep it to Paris. Very soon we'll be able to update this, and then defining the networks. Okay, so here we're defining VeChain TESTNET. This is where we're going to be deploying the contract for the purpose of today's workshop. And you just need to make sure that you've got the correct URL and so on, and also mainnet over here. Okay, so as soon as you've finalized the app, you're ready to go to a mainnet for the first time, you will just query this setting instead. As you can see, there's also an option over here for delegated testnet. Now, we mentioned this briefly a few moments ago. There's an option to delegate gas fees to a sponsor. On testnet, it could be interesting if you want to experience how the whole delegation works. But once again, you can always claim testnet tokens on the faucet. Okay, so you could potentially try to delegate these fees on mainnet if needed. But yes, I thought that this was a very important aspect to cover when it comes to deployment of your contract, because otherwise, we might have some troubles when it comes to deploying it to VeChain. So first things first, let's compile the contract. Oops, that's not right. It says npm. Let me clear this up. And compile. Okay, so in this case, it will take a few moments for you to compile the contract. So do be patient, because that means that your contract is being prepared so it could be propagated to the blockchain. As you can see here, it says nothing to compile because we've already compiled it. But if you just run npm run compile, your contract will be ready to deploy. And next, let me clear this. We're gonna run deploy, and we'll deploy this to VeChain's testnet. Okay. This also takes a few moments, and this is where you need to make sure that your wallet has gas tokens. Okay, we need to make sure that your wallet is able to sign the transactions, and to sign the transaction, like we mentioned, we need tokens in the wallet. Okay, as you can see, our contract has been successfully deployed, and like we see over here at the top, you see the transaction receipt. Okay, this is part of the reading function that we had earlier. you can always explore or go to the Explorer on TESTNET to make sure that your transaction has been fulfilled. But now that our contract has been compiled, our contract has been submitted to the blockchain, and we've got a strong front end, then I think that we can get started and look at how our application works. So let me first of all initiate the server. Okay. At the moment, like I mentioned earlier, we've got a local server. Okay, but obviously always better to have that on the cloud later on. And then I want to run the application. So we left the application active a moment ago. As you could see, I was showing you all how things look like on the VeChain kit. So now let's load it up so we can fully experience the full flow for users. Okay. Once again, we've got our VeChain kit wallet connect, and I'm gonna connect my VWorld wallet. My wallet will load up. I'm gonna connect a different wallet because I've already used my other wallets. Here we go. And this is gonna be registering me as a new student. Excellent, we can close this. Now I'm gonna put here Alex. Okay, will probably ask me, oh, I don't have tokens. So now would be a great time to go to the faucet. So how about we go to the faucet? There we go. And we can claim some tokens. Okay, there we go. And as you can see, just a few moments, we received 500 VET tokens and 50 VTHO tokens. Back to our application. Alex, yes, I want to register myself. And now my application should allow me to register. Okay. Transfer has been completed. Fantastic. So with that, a new student has been registered. Next, we want to submit our proof of learning. Okay, so how about we submit our Learn to Earn project? Okay. So I want to make sure that I use the same name that I added earlier and a proof. This will be included, right, on our transaction like we saw earlier. And it's going to be getting it ready, sending it to the blockchain, and then the moderator will receive these submissions to be able to review them. As you can see, we've got submission has already been submitted and is awaiting for approval. Now, for this workshop and for the app itself, we haven't created the full UI to approve transactions from a moderator's perspective, but we do have examples like this. Okay, as you can see, this was done just now, so it's 9th of September, and this is UTC time, of course. We submitted our Learn to Earn URL, and that was for Alex Lopez. So that was me and my wallet address. Okay. Now, me as a moderator, I might want to, go ahead, open this URL, or I might want to create a admin panel so I can review all of these submissions. But the bottom line is that we are able to receive all of these submissions and be able to approve them. If you wanted to test how to approve these submissions, you've got this curl command over here. Or if you wanted to test how it looks like when rejecting a submission and what events are being emitted from the contract, you can also do it with that. Okay. That is all for the walkthrough of this full stack application. Once again, let's do a really quick recap. And first thing is we went through everything that we needed for a full stack application. Once again, I encourage all of you to clone the public repo. You've got the command in the description of this video, and you can explore how the code has been built up. Okay, you can also start your application using this as a template if you wanted to do so. We covered everything to do with the VeChain kit. So going to reown, getting your app ID, and integrating the VeChain kit on your application. That, just a side note, we did briefly cover there is a local storage of information. We've got a local database where we're also saving these wallet addresses. Okay. Next, we briefly looked at VeChain SDK, how to subscribe to information from the blockchain, how to read information from each of those transactions, and also how to prepare our scripts to write transactions so we can submit proofs to the blockchain. And finally, we looked at the Solidity backend, so brief structure of a Solidity smart contract, how to integrate the VBeta contracts, and of course, we compiled and deployed it using Hardhat in this case. For today, that is all. That's all we've got for you guys today. There's plenty of resources in the description below. You've got all the documentations of the tools and SDKs that we've used today. You've got links directly to public repos, both for the SDK and also for this Learn to Earn application. And you've got plenty of additional resources. So on academy.vechain.org, there's a lot of lessons. You need to have certain level of coding experience, but it will walk you through everything that we've covered today in more detail. There's also links there to the faucet, and remember that you can also reach out to us. We've got the Telegram link available in this description. Once again, make sure you're only clicking the official links. That's what we've got. That's what we've got on the description. So again, go ahead, click on that, and join the Telegram group chat so we can answer your questions. Okay. I'll give you just a moment. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. And then otherwise we can wrap the workshop for today. Something that I can bring up while you guys are thinking about any potential questions is how you can set up addresses for the backend. So there's a bunch of things that we can do over there. We've briefly covered. Thank you, Dina. Let me quickly open up our application. Here we go. Actually, no, we'll open this up. Okay, let's take a really brief look. So earlier we looked at using your own wallet address, right? So to send a transaction to the blockchain, we've used our own wallet address that we've saved a mnemonic in our env file. However, you could also create keys on the fly. And one thing that you can do is just using this method over here. So a bunch of things that we can do here. Let me close this. Okay, so we can actually print this. Let me just hide this for a second. Oops. Okay, let's see if this will work correctly. So in this case, we still need to initiate the Thor client. Okay, we'll initiate it on testnet. And we can actually generate private keys. And then from that, we can generate the public key for that wallet. Okay, so just using these two lines of code, we can generate keys for users. Okay, let's quickly take a look at this. node write delegation. It will probably print an error, so ignore the error because I didn't comment everything else. But here we go. So we've printed a wallet address right here. Okay. With this, we would need to index this wallet. Then we know the wallet itself. The reason is because if we print this again, we've got a complete different wallet address. So one thing that you can do for either yourself or users when it comes to writing transactions would be just to generate those keys on their behalf. So you can do this, you can get the wallet address, and you can just copy that address and then send it some VET tokens and VTHO tokens from your wallet, right? So going into our wallet address, we could very easily just get some VET tokens. Let me just reset this. Excellent. We could just send it some VTHO tokens to that wallet. Here, let's send 10. And that's all. Now that our wallet has been funded, then we'll be able to sign a particular contract. So sign a particular transaction. So here we go. We would just need to index it correctly. And that's all we need to be able to sign this transaction. Okay, let me head back here if there's any other comments. Otherwise, guys, we can wrap it up for today. And remember, you've got loads of resources down below. You've got the option to also reach out to us on Telegram. So you've got the official link in the description. And again, you can also pre-register for the hackathon. Remember that starts on 22nd of September, and we look forward to reviewing your submissions. If that's all, thank you so much, guys. Great to see so many of you joining today, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.